funny how things change sometimes, isn't it? Remember when President Obama said this?
Healthcare. People say, well, you have this great healthcare plan, but how are you going to pass it? You know, it failed in '93. And what I've said is, I'm going to have all the negotiations around a big table. We'll have doctors and nurses and hospital administrators, insurance companies, drug companies. They'll get a seat at the table. They just won't be able to buy every chair. But what we will do is we'll have the negotiations televised on C-SPAN so that people can see who is making arguments on behalf of their constituents and who are making arguments on behalf of the drug companies or the insurance companies. And when we are negotiating for that plan, we are going to have C-SPAN on, and you will see who's compromising the American people's interests. Here's the only thing, though. I'm going to do it on C-SPAN. We're going to do it publicly. But here's the difference. I'm going to do it all on C-SPAN.
Well, clearly that didn't quite happen. Karl Rove joins us. Karl, he didn't say it once. He said it, I think we just listed 4, he probably said it a few more times. And I guess the polite thing to say is that, you know, it didn't happen. You could say it was a lie.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it was a lie. Certainly,
what do you mean? I mean, it's like, I know no one wants to call things like it is, but, you know, this is so important to the American people, and with all due respect to both parties, you know, we ought to be able to have it out in the open.
Well, look, he's obviously changed his mind about it. Because, look, he said a lot of things during the campaign that have to do with health care that don't matter to him any longer. He said, remember all that inspiring language about red state, blue state, but we're United States. He was going to bring Republicans and Democrats together. There's not been one substantive meeting on health care in the House, the Senate, or at the White House in which Republicans have been given a seat at the table for substantive discussions. He might have brought him in once or twice to say, I'm going to work hard on this issue, but there's been no substantive discussion where he said, what do you want in here and how do we make it work? Remember also, he ran television ads in battleground states. It was the second most widely displayed ad in the entire campaign, in which he called, quote, government-run health care, quote, extreme. So he said a lot of things during the campaign which he's clearly changed his mind on and discarded.
And we can go back historically. Every administration, we could find, probably the one you worked in, every other one that's done that too. But the thing that bothers me is that when something is so profoundly important, it's what's wrong with transparency. You know, when you promised it, and I don't know if he's, you know, changing your mind. I don't mind if you change your mind on, you know, facts change.
But I mean, I can explain it.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, explain why we can't do it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, is it naivete when he said it, or is it just a...
Look, I did think it was naive, because this is a very complicated undertaking. As we can see, we have a 2,000-page bill. And with 70 new programs in it and 1,357 instances where the Secretary of Health and Human Services is directed to write rules. So it's a big, complex deal. And you can't necessarily show it on C-SPAN. But
why?
Well, because, look...
Why not?
Because people will be preening for the cameras. You do want this thing...
Then we'll make fun of them. We'll make fun of all the ones that are preening, and, you know, everybody will take a shot at it. But at least it's, you know, at least we can see what's going on.
You know, though, and look, I thought it was naive and not very smart to do it. But look, if you're sitting there in the back room, you do need the ability to say, for people to say, look, Mr. President, if you'll do this, we'll give way on that. And you put that on a television camera, and people are going to be very loath to do it.
What, do you mean to see how the sausage is made?
Yeah, sausage is not very
So instead we sort of just get dumped on us, whether it's good or bad. It's just all of a sudden at the end of the day it gets dumped on us.
It ought to be a process in which all the policy players have a seat at the table and can discuss things, and driven by a president who really does want to listen to people and bring them together. So let me just give you an example. In 2001, George W. Bush had advocated a big tax cut. The administration sat down with Democrats out of camera's view and said, what is it that we need to do in order to make this thing more palatable for you? And over a course of weeks and months, they said, slim it down from 1.7 to 1.3, get an expiration date on everything that's in there, and dial it up a little bit here and dial it down a little bit there. And that's exactly what ended up happening. And as a result, a quarter of the Democrats in the United States Senate voted for the Bush tax cuts in 2001. And, you know, maybe that would have happened if it had been on television. But I think, look, putting it on C-SPAN, what he originally talked about doing would have probably hardened opposition, made it rather than having the sort of give and take that you can have in private conversations. Look, there ought to be more transparency in government, but sometimes presidential leadership means sitting down and saying, what is it that we need to do to help you come to support this?
Well, the Republicans tell me that they don't get a seat at the table. Of course, he went through this long list. He doesn't name Republicans. I talked to Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, and he says, what are you talking about? Of course they can. I mean, we hear, you know, depending
foolish.
on... Well, I'm saying that both sides tell us completely different things, which is why we like the transparency. Well, then let us at least see who is and who isn't.
Yeah, look, the record, though, shows it. I mean, I repeat, let Steny Hoyer point to a single substantive meeting.
He says it's a party of no.
No, it isn't. It's a party that's got a lot of yeses. They're in favor of increasing the amount of money people can save tax-free for out-of-pocket medical expenses. They want to have interstate sale of health insurance. They want to have risk pools at the state. They want to allow small businesses to join together to pool their risk. They want to have transportability of health insurance so people can take it from job to job. They want to have a significant tax credit for people who are working but don't have coverage, make too much to get it under Medicaid, don't have enough from their employer to get it, and don't make enough to pay for it themselves. There are a bunch of things that Republicans have talked about, and medical liability reform. Not a single one of the things that I've just outlined that Republicans have been advocating have the Democrats sat down and said, what's on your list and what can we put in this bill?
And that's why I love the whole idea of the C-SPAN, because I'd love to see the different questions and the give and take, because we get told different stories by different sides, and I'd love to see that.
Well, you know what? We do have a chance for C-SPAN to play a role here, and that is in committees and on the floor of the House. And in the floor of the House, what has happened is Speaker Pelosi has called for a closed rule which limits the amount of amendments and the amount of discussion that could be. They rolled that bill through the House of Representatives with virtually no effort, no attempt to give the Republicans a shot to amend the bill. They said you got to come up with a vote to substitute, and that's it.
Well, never dull.
Never dull.
Carl, stand by. We're going to have much more with you in a moment. And coming up, the new